So welcome to the Behind the Bar podcast.
Thank you.
If you could just introduce yourself a bit and tell us where you're from.
Okay. I'm Vic Holbrey. I'm a regional employment broker for HMPPS, covering the East Midlands, which in essence means I'm a link between the prisons within that region and the businesses in and around that area, trying to bring them two together to support an ultimate reduction in reducing reoffending.
Oh, nice. I think from what we know, that kind of works with the New Futures Network.
Yeah,
right?
so I'm basically part of New Futures Network. It's a bit complicated because it's not straightforward in terms of the structure, but the best way to look at it is, or I describe it to people, is New Futures Network is a project, and that project has a dotted line to individuals within each prison region, of which I'm one of those individuals.
Oh, okay, cool. So you talk about the reoffending rates. So why is employment so important and such a key focus when it comes to that?
But it's quite simple, really. I mean, if you're released with nothing positive to engage in, and obviously there's various channels in that. Employment is one of them. Education could be another. But what we've found is that the quicker someone can go into employment post-release, the less likely they are of reoffending, particularly when you've got individuals who not made a career of it necessarily. You won't necessarily describe it as that, but there's regular interaction with the justice system. By going into employment, it massively reduces the chances of them re-engaging in that kind of activity again.
So do you think that is because they have something else to occupy themselves, or is there like another reason as to why employment is such a...
Much more smart people than me will probably be able to give you a good definition of that. I personally believe that it does keep the mind occupied. Obviously, when you're going into work, for a lot of individuals, they've never had a job before, so they don't get that buzz. They've never had that buzz when they actually achieve something, deliver something, get a well done and that type of thing. So personally, I think there's lots of different reasons as to why employment is really good for ex-offenders and the communities as a whole. But as I say, I'm sure other people will be able to give you some really solid evidence as to exactly why, from a brain point of view, it supports that. But I think all normal people need to know is that actually the more they engage in a positive activity through the day, the less likely are to engage in less positive activities.
Yeah, so in what aspect do you think hospitality plays such a big role in that, and why pushing towards possibly more hospitality jobs with reducing reoffending rates?
I think hospitality is in essence the same as any other sector, really, from our perspective. It's an opportunity to engage in something positive. Whether that's hospitality, whether that may be construction, XYZ, or whatever sector you could possibly think of, hospitality does seem to be, and more so probably over the last 5-6 years, slightly more welcoming than other sectors. So that's obviously a positive, because if you've been inside for a number of years, a number of months, whatever it may be, you are going to be nervous of coming out and re-engaging into society and what people will say and think about where you've been and what you've done. And it's nice to go into an environment where everybody accepts you made a mistake, and now's your chance your opportunity to prove it was a mistake and it won't happen again.
When it comes to leaving prisons, you touch on the fact that having the ability to have these jobs does keep them occupied, and they have something that can always give them their well done and have them have a positive reinforcement. What do you think some of the biggest challenges are that people face when coming out of prison?
In terms of employment and stuff, there's the obvious ones, but there's also the unseen aspect. So it's it's your friends and family. People forget that it's not just pressure on the individual to change from their own perspective, and from a criminal justice perspective. You need to stop what you're doing and do something positive now. A lot of times there's a big family behind people, or not, as the case may be, and both of them can bring the pressures as well with them. If you've got wife, close relatives pressuring you, you need to change, that can be quite difficult at a time when you know, you've just walked
Quite
out the gate, and
overwhelming
it's,
as well.
and it's like, oh God, I've got all this stuff to sort out. But in terms of just normal employment, the biggest challenge I feel is there's still it's public perception to some degree, and there's certain crimes which people obviously, you know, would not tolerate and not support, and that's down to them. You know, it's not for me to get into that, but in general, public perception can be quite difficult, because if I mean, there's examples where, you know, someone's come out of prison and we're talking to a company what's looking to recruit X number of individuals. You know, they've gone through all the processes, they're committed to giving it a go, and then somebody in the background, in the warehouse or in, you know, the office space will say, well, we can't have any, you know, we can't have any feeds because I were broke into 17 years ago. And, you know, I'm not, you know, a horrible thing to happen to you, but at some point you have to start to look at this as an opportunity to stop it from happening, and all the benefits that will give both to those individuals, their families, their close friends, the close communities, and society as a whole. Because if all we ever do is just say, yeah, we will, but not this, 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 and this, before you know it, there's only a tiny minority of releases, you know, which are going to be able to take up those opportunities, and ultimately it's this type of stuff which stops them from doing it.
Yeah, I can imagine that it is quite difficult for someone, like you say, with perception, because with like social media being around, there is always like someone will say something, a face will be shown, there'll just be a lot more publicity possibly around like a smaller crime, or whatnot. So then it just spirals, and people recognise these people and then have preconceived judgments about them.
Yeah, and that's a big challenge actually, because there's, you know, everybody has their own preconceived judgments or knowledge base that they revert back to, and quite often it's incorrect.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, well, if you're a thief, you're going to be a thief type thing. So particularly in hospitality, you know, I'd imagine there will be quite a few individuals who'll be like, oh, well, we have cash.
Yeah.
You know, we have tills, you know, and that
Alcohol.
type of thing. Yeah. You know, and they're all considerations, but they're the exact same considerations that have if you were recruiting from an agency, or if you're recruiting, you know, directly. What I always say to a lot of the companies is the difference between working with us and others is, you know exactly what our people have done, because we'll ask them to tell you. We'll ask them to explain to you what situation they were in at the time while those things were happening, you know, and how that affected them. So you will know everything about this individual you can possibly can.
So transparency will play like a massive part in.
And you know, and going back to the, you know, we have cash on site. A lot of individuals get out on what they call license. So, you know, if you've been sentenced for 2 years, you may serve 12 months, something like that. I mean, it's not always as simple as that, but the rough idea is that. Now that means that for the next 12 months or whatever period it is, you can't do anything wrong, otherwise you're coming back. And if you think about it from the cash point of view, you know, £10 went missing out of someone's wallet, instantly everyone will turn to the ex-offender and say, well, it must have been him or her because she or he is an ex-offender. Yet the reality is, you know, for them to have done that, they're
risking everything.
Yeah, you know, they don't risk getting a slap on the danny and, you know, don't do it again.
Yeah.
You know, they go back to prison.
Yeah, they're risking their freedom for the next
so
however long.
It's a real big deal, and not everybody understands that, so they instantly revert to, it must be you because you are, instead of thinking, well, actually, you have so much more to lose by doing that or engaging in that than any one of these other people that works here.
Yeah. Would you find that that's one of the biggest challenges when it comes to employers in taking on someone that has left prison?
Yeah, so you know, it's definitely a concern for employers, and it's something we have to overcome. But it's proving less and less difficult these days. One which has raised its head, the more and more we get employers who are of a certain status within, you know, the locality, the national picture. PR is quite a big thing for them now.
Yeah.
You know, so they start to look at, what would our customers think of this? Before, you know, 5-6 years ago, before we really had a big push on this, the general response 9 out of 10 times was, you know, what will I think of this, or what will my staff think of this? Now it's also the added level of, actually, what will my customers think of this?
Yeah.
And, you know, we're pleased to see that the majority of companies who engage with a long haul for us well, actually our customers will think it's brilliant.
Yeah,
You
so
know, why shouldn't we support these people and give them another chance?
overall, you guys do such amazing work with people in rehabilitation and making the communities back to, or bringing them people back to their communities. So, how do you prepare people in custody for this type of work, or just work in general?
Um, well, I mean, within custody, we do a hell of a lot. We do as much as we can, with the restrictions and parameters we set. Because obviously, ultimately, we are a prison, or there are prisons, and there's only so much flexibility you have with inside a prison. But education is a massive part of what we deliver. That's obviously from a basic maths and English perspective, right up to hardcore work skills, in terms of virtually every sector you could possibly think of. But I'll bring it to hospitality because obviously that's why I'm here today. So if you imagine every prison site, the more it does internally, the less the risks are. So every time it has to bring something in, there's a risk associated with that, whether it be people coming in or vehicles coming in or tools or something like that. So the more it can facilitate internally, the less risk that process then has. And catering, hospitality is a perfect example of that. So, you know, the kitchens, the men and women's food on the wings, that's all done internally. It's not contracted out. So in a simplest way, we've probably got a few, well, at any one time, don't quote me on the numbers, but there will be hundreds of individuals every single day cooking for anywhere from 500 to 1,500 people per day, 3 times a day. And that's in what we call the main kitchen. So they're cooking for prisoners, if you like. Then in addition to that, a lot of sites have staff messes or, you know, staff rooms where staff can get something to eat. And again, that's then all that food, all that produce is completed by serving prisoners. And that can be up to MBQ level 3, whether it be food prep and cooking, whether it be chefing. You know, some sites do silver service. You know, you've got the entire breadth of catering type training.
So there's a lot of like in-house experience.
Yeah, that's the one thing we can deliver.
Yeah.
So obviously, in terms of alcohol, there's none of that or anything like that. But cooking, I mean, the amount of companies from this sector which have been around my sites, and I'm sure all of my colleagues' sites, they are quite amazed at the skill level that these individuals are gaining, because, you know, some come in and say, oh, well, you know, we purchase this and it comes in like X and then we just process it. But it's like, oh, well, we don't. You know, we process it from here. So we get the raw materials and do whatever we need to do with them to turn that into a meal, as opposed to getting something pot processed, if that's the right way of describing it.
And they got a lot of hands-on experience with serving a lot of people, which in hospitality you're constantly churning out food, and I guess customer service as well, because they've got to interact, learn how to give good standard even in a place like that.
And you know, there's the added benefits as well, which, because what you'll find in a prison is that we always look to, you know, squeeze as much out of each aspect as what we can. And what I mean by that is, you know, okay, so there might be 10 people working in a staff mess producing food for officers, education and other visitors, and that then gives that individual, you know, as I say, up to a level 3 qualification in whatever area they're delivering in. But it also gives them a skill that they may not have had on the outside. So when they go back home, when they are released, you know, they know about healthy eating, they can cook their children you know, better food than perhaps what they were serving them at the time. Or, you know, if it's not children, it's just the family in general, or for themselves. You know, it just, you try to squeeze as many different positives out of a process as you can.
And a lot of life skills just in general. Because you have the kitchen and you have the customer service and you have the different trainings that you can provide, do you find any specific roles once they are released that they have a most success in?
We're doing, I say we, they are, you know, the individuals which are being released are doing really well in the, I'm going to say back office, it's not in the cooking, you know, the
back of house.
Yeah, back of house, sorry. I believe that's because there's a bit of a shortage at the moment of, you know, chefs and that type of thing. So a lot of the individuals which come through us, because they are trained to go from start to finish, as opposed to, you know, pick up a pre-packed or pre-processed meal and make it from scratch. You know, they're walking in, and you know, a lot of times, again, the companies will come around and say, like, actually, it's brilliant they do that, because if the microwave or the whatever other piece of equipment ever goes down, you know, sometimes we've got people there, well, I don't know what to do. Whereas we know with your lot, they can just, right, okay, you know, let's old-fashioned way, let's process it type thing. So they really like that, and what they also really like is the fact that they're multi-skilled. So quite often, again, we'll try and get as much out of a process as we can. So if somebody comes into an environment, hospitality environment, we won't just deliver the food prep and cooking, because from there they'll move on to the silver services if it's delivered there. From there they'll move on to, you know, the chef related qualifications. So before they know it, you know, it may have took them 12, I don't know, 18 months in some cases, but quite often they'll leave a training environment with a number of qualifications and a number of skills within that environment, as opposed to just doing the one course. So customer service were a perfect example. You know, they'll probably go from the actual hands-on food prep and cooking scenario to then maybe table service, where they'll get their maybe silver service as well as the customer service qual. So by the time these individuals stand in front of a future employer, who, you know, normally is used to someone coming either very, very raw with no skills, or one particular skill set that they're focused in, our men and women get to sit there and say, well, I've done this qualification, I've done this, I understand that. Probably got very little overall experience in all of them, because ultimately we can just deliver the qualification. But we hope that by having, if I can call them tickets, you know, 2 or 3 tickets within the environment, 2 or 3 qualifications, you know, the employers look at them and think, actually, yeah, you're worth a go. You know, you can really add something to my business, as opposed to me having to sit and watch you all the time. Because I think a lot of the times, employers think they're gonna have to sit there and watch him, and you know,
in a way surveillance them. But
no, not from a surveillance point of view. You know, not from a criminal point of view. More so from a, you don't know what you're doing, so I'm Michael Apprentice type thing. You know, as if they're going to be very, very raw. And they may not have years of experience within the sector, but they are qualified. You know, if you stick them in front of a process that they've been taught on, they will be able to do it. So you don't have to sit there watching them all the time. You can just let them get on with, whether it be the salad bar or whether it be something else. You know, you just let them crack on.
On top of, like, just the fact that they have so many skills that an employer can find reliable and just good for their business, what advice would you give to hospitality employers who want to be more inclusive in their businesses?
Just engage with initiatives like this. You know, you can, don't listen to others necessarily, because and what I mean by that is from a negative perspective, you know, because quite often somebody has a perception, but they can't back it up with actual experience. So I wouldn't do it because I was robbed 17 years ago. Type scenario. Whereas, you know, the world's changed, people change, and your sector's changed. You know, the entire employment market has changed in the last 5-6 years. More and more people are considering alternatives to what was the norm, and looking for something different. And you know, employers many years ago in a different life, I was obviously in a different role, and businesses will come to me regularly and say, oh, you know, we're not getting the right skills out of schools, we're not getting the right people out of colleges, universities, and you know, businesses would blame the education system for all their problems around recruitment, and then they'd use recruitment agencies and so on and so forth. And you know, fast forward 20 years, I'm still sat in that position now, different role obviously, but I still hear businesses say, oh, it's, you know, it's their fault, it's not working, they're not getting this, they're not getting that. It's like, well, actually, you've been doing the same thing for 20 years. Why do you expect a different result? Try something new. You never know.
Yeah, and there's such like a untapped market in a way if you don't give them chances.
You know, I it sounds really corny, but you know, if me, you, or any of your listeners or viewers, whatever they're called, don't like his job, we'll just find another. That's what we do. You know, fill a CV and do an application, send it off online, and hopefully someone responds to it positively. For a lot of these individuals, the fact that someone has given them the chance it is life changing. And it sounds really corny and completely hyped up. But that's what it is in some cases. This is their chance to prove to their friends and family that they are different, that they are going to try, that they can make something of themselves, which isn't seen as a negative. And they never forget the company that supported them or believed in them. There's another sector, the like call centre work and warehousing in particular. They call it the Tempe hoppers. And what they mean by that is, there might be let's say 10 warehouses in a local area, and one of them puts their hourly rate up by 10p. Everyone jumps ship and goes to there because it's an extra 10p an hour, and people need to completely understand that. But then what that means is the other warehouse then next door has to put their hourly rate up by 10p an hour. So they all move there and jump there, and before you know it, everyone just keeps jumping round for this extra little bit of money, which therefore pushes everyone's prices up, etc., etc. Whereas a lot of the individuals from the work we do, they're like, yeah, I could jump for 10p, for an extra 10p, or whatever the figure may be, but I have to have the same discussion with them. I have to explain the background, and who's to say that they're going to be as open-minded as this company now? So quite often they don't form part of that group. They sit and say, no, you believed in me, I'm going to stick with you. Eventually they may move on. I'm not saying they never do, because eventually they do. More often than not, they move up rather than move out, because again, this is the organisation which has believed in me, which has given me a chance when others wouldn't, so I'm going to repay that.
Yeah, I think loyalty in hospitality is also quite high anyway. So the fact that you have that added bit of just that you believed in me, so I get to stay, or I want to stay. I want to stay out. I want to keep doing what I'm doing because I enjoy it, or because this is somewhere that I feel appreciated.
Yeah. Or quite often, particularly with the larger organisations we work with, the national companies, they're quite happy at the fact that they don't always stay with them. They move on, and we love that, because they open their arms and just say, look, we would love to keep everybody we recruit and retrain up, but we've got to be realistic. We don't always have the vacancies at the right time in the right areas for everyone. But they're quite happy to deal with them for a few years. It really starts to build those individual skill sets and confidence up to the point where they go back and say, this is my next step, is this something you can offer me here? Unfortunately not, but we'll put a good word in for you with, in some cases, the competitors.
Yeah.
Because they do believe, and they've proved themselves. So it's not always a bad thing where people don't stay with the same company, particularly in this arena, because we see it as a real positive, because it's like, God, remember, that person had never worked before. They were 26, 27 years old, never had a job. Then they left prison, they got a job with XYZ hospitality company. 3 years later, they're going for promotion with a completely different company in the same sector. That's a real success.
Yeah. So if someone listening wanted to get involved, whether that be an employer, mentor, supporter, how can they help? How can they be involved? How can they, I guess, reach out?
Well, hopefully my contact details will be put on this arena here. Otherwise, the NFN has a national website. They can just log into that. There's also lots of information on there about the different ways in which you can engage, the different support we look at, because it's, ultimately we're interested in jobs on release, because that's what's going to make the difference. But alongside that, we also understand that, sometimes if you've never engaged in that sector before, you don't really understand what it's about. So companies will say, look, unfortunately, I've got no jobs at the moment. We say, well, could you come in?
Yeah.
Could you give us an hour of your time during this month to, host a session with however many people are interested in just finding out about the sector?
Yeah.
And tell them warts and all, you're going to be working Saturday nights, you're going to be working Sunday afternoons, in some cases, you're going to be working bank holidays. Tell them the truth about working for the sector, and they'll vote with their feet. But there's always ended up being a group of individuals like, actually, I don't mind that. If it means I get out of what I was doing before, it's probably good for me, actually, if I work nights, because, that's when I used to get into trouble.
Yeah.
So if I've got something to keep me occupied, it's a good thing. So, even if companies can't offer jobs at that time, we know they do eventually. Everyone does eventually. If they come to us, oh, well, I want to start slowly first because I'm not sure. It's like, fine, okay. we know that, you know, once you've had a few good experiences, whether
Yeah.
it be providing, you know, an interview session where you just, you know, run people through a mock interview, you know, it's all good stuff for us, and particularly for obviously more so for the men and women we look after, because they may never had an interview before.
Yeah.
And having, you know, if I sit there and do an interview, it's a bit false. I do the best I can with them, but they know it's a bit false because
Yeah,
you know,
and
they
they
know me.
can be daunting as
Yeah,
well. So
yeah, well-
even just having that bit of experience, even if it's a mock interview, they know what to prepare for.
The important thing is it's with someone real
Yeah.
from the sector who knows their onions, you know,
Yeah.
and can sit there and say, right, if I were you, I'd stay away from that bit. You know, I can give them the standard response to an interview, but individuals from your sector can go into the detail of what
Yeah.
they look for and etc. etc. So it's a much better experience for the individuals than us doing it ourselves.
So one last question, if you don't mind.
Yep.
When people have got that first job, how do you continue supporting them? Do you keep in contact? Anything like that?
Not the prison per se, because obviously the prison is there during their sentence while they're inside. They move over to a different service, which is probation. So post-release, they then come under probation. But in addition to that, there is also quite a lot of charities and third sector partners who, you know, exist to support individuals from various backgrounds, of which ex-offenders quite commonly fit, you know,
Yeah.
one or two of those at least. And then in addition to that, you've got all your mainstream services as well, you know, your DWP and stuff like that. So collectively, groups of organisations and support services come together, but predominantly it's probation in the first instance, because quite often individuals have to report back to them for a period of time, or, you know, it may be there's some restrictions on where those individuals can go, so again, you know, that's got to be checked into. But it's not so much the prison service which maintains that support post-release. It's other services such as probation, DWP, and as I say, other third sector organisations in and around that area.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming down and coming
No
to
problem.
talk to us.
Thanks for having me.